And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live WeatherBrains episode 1017. This is for July the 14th, 2025. A little late starting. And again, for those that have not heard, between now and early August, the shows will be starting a little later than usual. Typically, we always start about 10 minutes before the top of the hour. We'll be starting near or just after the top of the hour for the next couple of weeks with some logistical things going on here. But we will be back to the regular schedule August the 11th. Anyway, sorry for the delay, but welcome to Weather Brains, weekly show for weather geeks, dweebs, nerds, dorks, and weenies. All right, got the Monday night weather party here rocking and rolling. I think they're waiting on me, which is horrible. So sorry, but I think everybody is here. And so let me get the recorders going and we'll get this thing started. All right, track one, track two. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
WeatherBrains episode number 1017, the weekly show for weather geeks. 19 years old, 1017. How about that? This is for Monday, the 14th of July. 2025, in the middle of summertime. So let's see who's on the line here. I see John Gordon, the legendary John Gordon, the man that brings the energy, the passion, the truth, everything you'd want in a meteorologist, a human being. That is John Gordon. John, it's an honor to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you so much to be with you. I'm a member of SPAN. I'm in the JV squad, setting up the main squad here. It's like the band before ZZ Top or something. I'm just the entry level band. We've had a lot of storms, James. Usually in the summer, there's a point where the U.S., except the northern stream, kind of shuts down, with a big lid of high pressure and warm mid-level temperatures. What would you say? 75% of the country is getting convection every day?
It's been busy. It has been a very busy summer. I will certainly agree. There's been a lot to talk about. I'll say that. I mean, there's been a lot to talk about, and a lot to talk about tonight. Let's go to James Adelot in Tulsa. James, what was your high today? Give me a number.
88, I believe. I'll know off the zero Z meter.
You can live off that. That's not bad for a July.
You've been breaking rainfall records, haven't you?
We are within an inch. We're just a little bit above an inch away from our average annual rain already. So very happy mosquitoes.
You were talking about floods Monday, and I did a weather history yesterday on my video about the Kaw River in 1951. 17 inches of rain, 9th through the 13th. And it was a terrible disaster. Is it still the worst natural disaster in the history of Kansas?
Probably so. I mean, it depends on, I guess Udall tornadoes probably up there too, but I'm not sure. I guess it depends on what metric you want to rank them. But yeah, we can get some enormous precipitable water levels.
Let's go down to Kim Cloco McLean in Norman. Kim, I understand Rick was dispatched to some tough duty today.
Yeah. Kim's fighting the good fight over there.
Okay. I think she is fighting the good fight. So anyway, Rick Smith has been dispatched down to Texas, and Troy is not able to join us at the beginning of the show. Hopefully we pick him up at the end of the show. But let's go up to the Arctic Circle to Jen Nairmore, who has kind of dodged all these bullets. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. I am I'm busy, but good. And it got up to 88 here today too. So yeah, pretty warm and toasty up here in Ohio land.
All right. Well, Bill Murray, let's get this started. I feel good about this show. It's going to be good. Go.
Yeah, James. Fun tonight. Tonight, home run derby in Atlanta. Golly, it's a beautiful night in Atlanta. It's gonna be some nice weather over there. Tonight, got two special guests. First, the reason we're having the show tonight, John Bangoff is the lead meteorologist at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in State College, Pennsylvania. Has been on the show before. Years of operational forecasting experience, plays a key leadership role in ensuring the accuracy, timeliness, not timelessness, and relevance of forecasts for Central Pennsylvania. Is deeply involved in mentoring younger forecasters and helping communicate critical weather information to emergency managers and the public. Penn State graduate, what do you say, Jen? We are
Penn State.
very good.
Listen, 8 years and running, Ohio State has had a winning streak. This year could
Here
be
we
the year
go.
that it all changes, so I'm enjoying it while I can.
There we go.
I thought you were about to talk a lot of smack here, but no, I liked your outlook for this.
Listen,
So.
I live in a neighborhood in a town where it's Penn Staters galore, so I have to be a little bit diplomatic and wear scarlet and gray, but not talk too much because I know the minute the clock strikes zero and Penn State has the lead, my life will change considerably. So I got to be a little bit careful. I'm in
Yeah.
enemy territory all the time, though.
Yeah, it's been very difficult for me to be in the midst of all the scarlet and gray here for the past 8 years. So,
So,
Here's my coffee delivery service right here. Thank you, sweetheart.
but it's great to
No,
be
I
here.
like it.
Excited to chat tonight, and thanks so much for having me and Tom on as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's always good to have you with us, and I'm thrilled that you were able to join us. So thank you so much. And he introduced us to a special guest tonight. Our guest, WeatherBrain, is an award-winning journalist and author whose latest book, Cloud Warriors: Deadly Storms, Climate Chaos, and the Pioneers Creating a Revolution in Weather Forecasting, was just named one of Barnes and Noble's best science and technology books of 2025. With a background in investigative and narrative journalism, Tom brings a deep curiosity and fresh perspective to the world of atmospheric science. In researching his book, he traveled across the country. He embedded with scientists at the National Weather Service, visited Penn State, interviewed some of the leading thinkers in meteorology, including our very own Kim Cloko McLean. His book explores the shifting landscape of weather forecasting at a time that climate change, technical disruption, and institutional uncertainty is shaking the foundations of our industry. So, John, I'm going to start off with you tonight after I say hello to Tom. So, Tom, welcome to the show. Thank you for your enthusiasm, being excited about being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Although this is a pretty intimidating group for a liberal arts major to be on the show tonight.
We're the ones that are intimidated. So don't.
Hello from rainy New York City. Also, it's flood warnings all across the metro area. So if you hear a few thunderclaps while I'm on, you'll know what's going on.
Well, A, we're just jealous that you're in New York City. B, we're very impressed that you have a radar app. So that's we're going in the right direction here. and John Gordon, you're tracking the flight delays. What are you seeing on the flight delay tracker there?
If you are flying out of Philly, Newark, Kennedy, LaGuardia, Hartford, Boston, your life is hell. You have no hope.
Don't
Show
say
title.
that, John. No hope.
Yeah, but what about today?
So John, I wanted to talk to you for just a second. Let's start local. What's going on your office, your area? That's God's country up there.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm actually reporting live from Kansas City right now.
That's right. You're on the road.
Out here for lead forecaster training. They call it team lead development, and so it's exciting. Not a lot of travel happening, but they deem this course to be mission critical. I imagine because of the sort of mass exodus of a lot of folks with a lot of seniority that retired, there's now sort of a void that folks, hopefully like myself, at some point in the next few years will be able to promote into leadership positions. And so here, beautiful, sunny, smooth travels today from State College to Chicago to Kansas City. And man, the Kansas City airport, incredible. Last time I was here, it was the old airport, not nearly as enjoyable, but man, it's fantastic. So if you get a chance to come check it out, definitely recommend that. back in State College, similar to what Tom was saying with New York City, tons and tons of rain. I was just looking on the radar app, and looks like radar estimates about 6 or 7 inches in Lancaster County, southeast PA. That 2 weeks ago tonight, actually, I was working the desk in that same area, got 7 or 8 inches. We ended up issuing a flash flood emergency. So still pales in comparison to what my friends in Texas have been dealing with, but it's sort of priming the pump, it feels like, for a bad situation if we get a poorly placed tropical system coming up through here. Some of the worst flooding we get in central PA, the likes of Lee and Agnes and things like this. You get significant rainfall, the steep terrain, antecedent wet conditions. So we're hopeful that's not going to be the case, but certainly as the wet pattern continues, I think hydro is going to be a increasing or at least continued concern up in our parts. Otherwise, though, State College is awesome in the summertime, quieter, fewer students. We just had Arts Fest this past week, so always nice to get into town. And office is doing well. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of kind of tumult going on across the agency, but we fared pretty well from a staffing standpoint and continuing to be just committed to doing what we can to keep pushing things ahead. And very grateful to even be able to have the opportunity to fly out to Kansas City to get some inspiration and hopefully carry that back in the midst of all the chaos going on back at the WFO.
And Dr. Kim Cloko McLean, I hope that what John just said doesn't jinx us down the road here, because it could happen. Even a weak tropical system could bring to fruition what he said.
It's true. We'll just hope for the best. That's really, truly what we are going to do out here. But yeah, it's so good to see you, by the way, John. So nice to see you here in our family squares. And Tom, I'm delighted to meet you. And I know we chatted, but I feel like I get to meet you in a whole new way, actually visually seeing you. So delighted that you're joining us on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. In fact, it's a little strange. The two key influencers of my entire project researching this book are on this show tonight, John and Kim. And then, I mean, honestly, every single person on the show's name came up, at multiple points. But the time with John and the conversations I had with Kim were actually pretty critical for me.
It's so delightful. I'm so glad we're having this show, Bill.
I know. I'm so excited. So I can't wait to dig into all of it. So, John, you've touched on the conference that you're at. Talk about the role of a lead forecaster real quick, because we don't spend enough time delving into that, what that really means. We know it's important, but why is it important? And talk about what the roles and responsibilities are for that person.
Yeah, so all the weather forecast offices have a batch of general forecasters or sort of entry-level forecasters and then lead forecasters. And the roles and responsibilities are fairly similar across the board with both of those groups of folks, right? You're issuing aviation forecasts, you're editing grids, you're putting out watches and warnings and advisories, you're doing social media, you're taking phone calls, you're doing all that stuff. But the role of the lead in particular, it's supervisory responsibility. And so you are ultimately responsible for everything that happens on that shift. So it comes with a variety of sort of team building and making sure that there's clear duty allocation for a significant severe weather event. For example, you're the one that's going to be designating who's going to be the primary, maybe secondary radar operator, who's going to be the ones that's responsible for sort of keeping the ship moving, with keeping grids updated in the area forecast discussion, all that. Who's doing social media, who's communicating in NWS chat. It's sort of the field general, if you will. And then it also manifests itself in making sure staffing is adequate. In the event of something like somebody calling off sick, the lead is responsible for looking at who's available and calling them in for overtime. But more importantly, for significant weather events, ensuring that we're ready and able to respond to whatever weather may occur, however well forecast it might be. So the responsibilities are really, really important. One, having, I was a general forecaster for, I guess, 6 or so years. Before getting promoted to a lead forecaster a year ago, February. And it's been a big change from the role and responsibility standpoint, right? Because when you're general forecaster, you kind of take care of your duties and in what you do, but there's not maybe as much necessity or an ability to perhaps have as much influence. But as the lead forecaster on shift, you really set the tone. And so it's been fun to kind of grow into that role and learn how to be successful in communicating with people. A lot of people have a lot of different skill sets and a lot of really great people at our office. And so it's been fun to kind of come alongside them and figure out, okay, how can I transition from being the doer to the facilitator, right? I think that was a big shift. Whereas, when you come in, or like a lot of people, it's like, I just want to do as much as I can. And then transitioning into now, it's more supervisory, and there's way more satisfaction out of fostering success and growth and excitement in other people than in just doing it myself. That's been hard. I'm a doer. I enjoy doing that stuff, but I think the role of lead has really shown me that it's just a lot bigger impact, and there's a lot more fulfillment on helping other people do it than being the one to do it myself. And so really have enjoyed that process. There's been some stressful moments for sure. Like a couple of weeks ago, when I was saying, you're hearing, incessant water rescue calls for about 3 or 4 hours straight. Not totally clear what's going on overnight, but a lot of important responsibility. And so really the leads are sort of the ones that are field generals, especially if management's not there in the evenings or overnight or on the weekends. That's got ultimate responsibility to ensure everything goes effectively with the team.
I was going to let James A go where I was going to go there if you wanted to, James A. I think that's exactly what I want to delve into for just a second. Why don't you pick up the baton and run with it there?
Yeah, John, what I was kind of observing, and same thing here in TV and various other vocations, I guess it's probably the same in anything, is that the transition from doing the things to enabling and encouraging other people to do the things is often very, very difficult for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been probably one of the hardest things for me. I've been able to learn from a lot of incredible leaders over the years, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. But again, as somebody that enjoys really working hard and creating hopefully quality content, right? There's a sense of there's sort of a gap that's created when you're saying, all right, it might not be up to the same standards that I would like it to be, but the high quality standard is not the main mission here, right? The main mission is growth and fostering and kind of paying it forward so that it's set up better for you in the future. And there's been a variety of projects that I've been involved with over the years: snow squalls, fire weather forecasting, Amish, that sort of thing. That's been really fun, and there's sort of a sense of ownership over it, where it's like, hey, this is my thing, and I enjoy it being my thing. But again, part one, figuring out how to effectively pass that off. What are things that maybe I ought not be doing and somebody else is able to do effectively to onboard them? But then also being content with, look, maybe this isn't going to even be carried out exactly as I would want it to. Maybe it's not going to be A, B, C, D step. Maybe they'll skip around or they'll find another way. And after enough times of watching it, you realize, you know what? It's not how I would have done it, but that actually ended up being better. Or I learned something new from it. But that letting go is certainly something that's been tough, but ultimately rewarding, because then you see other people be able to find their passions and their interest and excitement level in their seasons of life too, right? Like you can kind of ride the wave. You got a piece of the journey to say, hey, I'm going to take my skill sets and do it. But then it's way more fun when somebody else is able to take it on. Single point of failure is not really a good way to carry things out. As hard as it might be, it's been a really rewarding and challenging process for me, for sure, as I transition into this role.
It's kind of interesting because I have the same issue with my kids. The first time I asked them to fold clothes, to just be okay with the way they've done it, that they've just done it. But I remember walking around the corner, oh my soul.
I've got an almost 3-year-old at home, Aurora. She's incredible. And I think about that regularly when it comes to mowing my grass. I love mowing my grass. I love my lines being straight. And it's going to be a tough day when I pass that along. I know it's a valuable thing, but that's going to be tough when the lines aren't perfectly straight. And I'll have to just say, remember, it's about the journey, not about it being perfect.
Yeah, I can say I never got over that. I was still cutting the grass, unfortunately. Yeah, in my little hotel company, we had to come up with a word this year. My word was leverage, and it was just exactly this, because it was you have all these incredible tools and resources, at your fingertips, and you got to use them. And it is extremely rewarding. So, John, talk about how you met Tom during his research and what stood out about how he approached looking at the National Weather Service, and how his experience with working with him gave you new perspective on what you're doing.
Yeah, so thinking back, it's probably been what, 4 or 5 years maybe at this point, Tom, since the first time we met. Tom was a guest of John Neese, professor at Penn State, to a local AMS NWA chapter meeting. I was president of the local AMS NWA chapter here in State College at the time. And it was sort of an informal, casual conversation. Hey, Tom's here. We got to chatting. And then I got to kind of learn about the mission and desire for his book. So Tom would say he's a sort of certified weather weenie, just like all of us. Has been fascinated with it for a while, and he was setting out to better understand the weather enterprise. And I would say as we started talking more, it was sort of a natural fit because through the course of my career, I've also been fascinated by the ways that TV and emergency management and private sector and operations or sort of government forecasting all come together. And so one thing led to another. And we had some informal conversations sort of via email and then set up a visit for him to come to our office and spend a shift together. And had just a delightful time. And then since then have had a variety of conversations as well. But it really it became clear to me that Tom was in the business of wanting to better understand the weather enterprise, not from a meteorologist background, right? Like we all kind of know and are part and parcel of it, but him being a writer and an accomplished writer at that time in the Wall Street Journal, and I mean, really, really impressive resume when you look at it, an entirely different demographic and customer base that he's working with relative to the ones that we interact with on a daily basis. And so being able to have somebody that has a real sort of intellectual mindset in terms of how things work, even being able to ask really compelling questions for, okay, where has the weather enterprise been? Where is it right now? Maybe where's it going? And I think the really fun part over the last 5 years is that I don't even think Tom and I could have foreseen how quickly and kind of in an expedited way things would change. And so it's been cool that the book released last month in the midst of all this stuff that's going on, because I think it's just so timely. And I'm really, really excited to kind of dive in a little bit more and give people a glimpse of all the really incredible content that's in it tonight.
Well, that's a perfect segue right there, Tom. I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear when you're an author. Talk about what
I panicked a little at intellectual. John's given me way too much credit.
So talk about what first sparked your interest in weather, doing a subject that was worthy of a book.
Well, first, just so I can get it out of the way, I am gonna briefly plug the book. That is the action. Oh, John is so kind. And I have a lot of information up at www.cloudwarriorsbook.com. And I actually have a little story there that I wrote about writing the book as well that isn't in the book. But I would say my interest in weather, everybody talks about how they were a weather geek going back to childhood. I don't know that I was a weather geek. I was definitely a geek. My geekiness veered more into computers, and I was a very early adopter. I mean, relative to most people, to the internet. I was on the internet in like 1986 in college, and if any of you who were in a university setting then may well have had the same experience, but for me it was pretty amazing. And so my reporting career, which was mostly at the Wall Street Journal in the mid and late 90s, was covering the internet. And this was so long ago that there had been a whole debate inside the Wall Street Journal whether there should be a person covering the internet, and then there was like, maybe we need two people covering the internet, and then it kind of went from there. But I think a lot of my interest as a reporter, and the reason I gravitated to that beat so much, was I really find it rewarding to look at how science and technology's development shape society more broadly, and that mid 90s people were discovering the World Wide Web. They were getting onto America Online. The really early adopters had been on like CompuServe, as I had. But as a writer, I've found it really rewarding to try to go into some of these at the time seemingly very complex areas and try to gather information and then bring it back for a general audience, and especially the extent to which that science or technology has an impact on society. And it, the internet was changing jobs and the economy and the way people write. And, obviously, years later, that all seems pretty obvious, but in 1993, 94, 95, it wasn't so much. Brings me to weather. When I started looking at weather forecasting, I was just curious, as somebody who turns to the forecast every single day. I realized this was something I took for granted so much, and I wanted to understand it better. And I wanted to understand where the forecast comes from, but also I wanted to understand the truth about the cliche of the often wrong, always wrong forecast, which just seems to be some sort of societal meme that we can't stamp out. And I wrote a story for Time about it. I had gone from covering the internet at the Wall Street Journal to many, many years in management. And, John, good luck to you as you as you take it out. Because I got to a point where I had so many years in management, I was desperate to get back to getting out in the field and doing reporting, and trying to bring back stories to people. And the further I got into weather and meteorology, the more I began to appreciate that it fed some of these same themes of how science and technology impact society that have always sparked my interest. And so, they say don't set out to write a book unless you find the subject really interesting, because you're going to be spending, at least a couple of years with it. And I have to say, there was no issue on that front. The more I learned, the more I wanted to know. And I just, a special shout out to John, who, very kindly kind of let me into his world. And I've been trying to talk up that in particular recently. I had a op-ed for USA Today last week, because they were looking for pieces, obviously following the flood. And I wrote an op-ed, basically saying I've gone inside a WFO, and I'm here to tell you what that work is and how it's bigger and more important than the average person understands, who just sees the forecasts coming out, but doesn't see all of the work behind the scenes, not only to produce the forecast, but to try to, spark the preparedness both in the public, but also, in the emergency management, in the local community. And so that, I was very happy to get a chance to write about that for USA Today last week, because, it's a time when I think everybody needs to understand how to support this work. And I'll just say one more thing. I mean, I wish I had some budget to send a copy of my book, not for sales purposes, but I wish I could send one to every member of Congress and every member of the United States Senate, and try to get people to engage more with the complication of forecasting the weather, the incredible progress that's been made. I'm a news reporter, so I was looking for news the whole time. Kim was actually, again, I say she was pretty instrumental, because when she got me to start looking more closely at some of the social science work, and you all have touched many times on the communications problems, I was like, wow, I thought this was going to be about computer modeling, and and it is, and I have way too many words in one chapter about computer modeling. But it was also about, how do we solve the problem of turning good forecasts into better outcomes for people? And again, that to me resonated so much with what I had always been interested in as a writer. And now you have heard way too much about why I wrote a book and why it took me so long to write. So.
Nope. That's why this show goes on for 2 hours, Tom. There's never too much. Now, in chapter 3, you come full circle to a book that I could not get enough of when I was in the library, as a 7, 8 year old kid. It talked about the shift at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Caribou, Maine, and it transfixed me. And it was set in the 1960s, so it was a long, long time ago. You bring that forward to the current time, and you talk about, what it's like to be in the modern National Weather Service office with John in State College, Pennsylvania. Talk about that. And you've already kind of foreshadowed it a little bit, but what else was really eye-opening to you about that? Because you go into great detail about that process, and I think young meteorologists are going to love this part of the book.
Well, I think one of the reasons um uh I was about to say felt so attracted to John, but not in that way. One of the reasons I gravitated to John so much after the first time we met at that AMS session in State College was, I could just tell from talking with him. It was so energizing to talk to someone who was part of this next generation of forecasting. And again, I think at this point I had enough context to understand that, at least for some members of, the older generation, and who were certainly pioneering in their own way, but the job of being in a WFO is to look at the information and issue a forecast in that format that we all like. And as a one-time wire service reporter, I actually sort of like it because wire service stories were sort of similar in their own way. I met John, and just his energy about evangelizing the work that that he and his colleagues were doing in State College was so was so interesting to me. And I think in John very I think helpfully arranged for the day and night I spent with him, kind of looking over his shoulder, to be in in sort of the communications slot at the office for the evening. And again, I had had some of this from Kim and from others already, but to see, the sort of gap between that traditional, let's issue the forecast, really thinking about the forecast at the center rather than, maybe I think some of the evolution has been trying to think more and more and more about the people out there. And I've talked, Louis Uccellini was really helpful to me throughout the process of writing this book. And, I think that was a point he often stressed to me about the Weather Service. And, I think he has some pride about having tried to emphasize the community communication, the community involvement. And then, then I watched, over John's shoulder, some of the things he was doing. And, the Amish, the work with the Amish community that he was doing out of the office, I found such a telling example, because I was already interested in sort of communities with special needs, communities with specific vulnerabilities and specific needs. And, to see John not only, very capably, looking at the 87 windows on AWIPS and, and typing up a forecast, but, beyond that also, putting his heart and soul into projects on the side, like trying to make sure the Amish community had the right tools to get weather information, both for safety and also for their agricultural needs. I thought this is something I don't think anybody understands about meteorology. and the Weather Service. And I'll just step back there and say, yeah, one more reason I was interested in writing this book was, this is in no way meant to minimize, quite the opposite, the science of climate. But, when I looked around doing my research and at the, in the general interest journalism, I was like, there's been a bunch of great climate books. Like there's no way I'm going to top any of these. But then when I looked at weather forecasting, which to me just seems so obvious as this is the critical day-to-day tool in a world where we are facing extreme weather, where some types of extreme weather are affected by climate change. I thought, this is something I can really add some value to. That's why I'm just, I'm excited for people to get the book. And I hope that I have done some work to help demystify the work that you all do for a general audience.
Go, John Gordon. You had a good question.
Okay, Tom, you made a comment that you wish you had given a copy of this book to every member of Congress. It has been my experience, they like Cliff Notes. Very few read books. Cliff Notes. So, members, the Weather Service has been decimated, not just this administration, the last several administrations. Okay. The vacancy rates, you can look them up, go way back. You said you would, and you shadowed a bunch of offices. You saw right now a member of the Senate Science Justice Committee where the budget begins. What would you tell them in Cliff Notes if you had 90 seconds? What would you tell them about the Weather Service?
I don't know if this will sound like politically incorrect language, but I would say public safety is one of the most important functions of government. I mean, it's one of the reasons we have government, and that's what the National Weather Service is doing. And, you would no more cut your police department in half or your fire department in half or your hospital emergency room staff in half, although maybe some people would, as it turns out. And, I want the weather cops on the beat. I want to feel safe from the weather. Why are you defunding the weather cops? And I know I'm going to get in trouble for even having used that that phrase, but I guess I say that in hopes that might be a language that might fall on ears in a way that trying to talk to people in that realm about science or research and again, actually I am just as concerned about what's happening in operational forecasting as I am about what is happening in research. I again, we'll try to stay pretty, nonpartisan here, but I just was noticing today that some of the billionaire voices that have been very supportive of some types of cuts, it's striking to me as the guy who was covering the internet back in the 90s, many of these people got extremely rich from the internet, which they would not have if it were not for government research grants and programs. And so, the old saying of born on third base and, thinks they've hit a home run, at the very least, people who were working at like the National Center for Supercomputer Applications at the University of Illinois, they were at least born on first base, and maybe they wound up hitting a triple. And I just, I would do anything I could to try to get the decision makers to pay closer attention to the actual work that's getting done rather than a lot of buzzwords and I would also ask them to understand that if I came into their office and just randomly started whacking jobs, their office would fall apart pretty quickly. And I don't think, I'm not even sure how well I think the public is informed that so much of the types of cuts that we've seen are not even approached with intention. They're approached with a desire for quick results that can quickly be translated to, in my opinion, talking points on television and for some certain audiences. And I'm not even sure that is anything other than a nonpartisan view, because I think, anyone in America wants to hear more efficiency in government. There's nobody asking for higher taxes, and there's nobody super against lower taxes. At the same time, if they could focus on how far a dollar at NOAA goes in terms of public safety versus some other in some cases highly ridiculous applications of money, I think it would do us all a world of good.
Thank you, Tom, for being straight up. By the way, in the shareholders report we did for years, it's the price of a Big Mac pays our salary. One Big Mac. That's it.
Well,
James, you got to say something funny. James has got something funny lined up, but just one Big Mac.
Well, maybe there's a particularly notorious consumer of McDonald's who's a decision maker. So maybe that maybe that's the way. Although trying to suggest reduced Big Mac consumption might actually be a tough sell there. I don't know.
Maybe we should have framed it as a quarter pounder. It might have been better. But Tom, you came across Rick Santorum's proposal 2005. How did that proposal, what did you think about that proposal when you saw it? And did you know about it already? Did you uncover it in your research? And, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it had been on my radar contemporaneously, which again actually just sort of tells you the extent to which a lot of news about the weather world, other than the actual forecast, is relegated to the middle pages or the back pages. Sometimes I think, it did come up. I visited AccuWeather, and I spent some time with the people there, and in a lot of ways, I think AccuWeather does within the enterprise what we want private enterprise to do, which is develop some specialized forecast services for customers with special needs. The National Weather Service, I could not, at least the way it's budgeted, and I think should not, as a public safety organization, have to go too deep into hey, you've got a facility based here and you want a pinpoint forecast for it. Going back to the Santorum proposal, I think one thing that had struck me probably when I was about a third of the way in to my research and had a better understanding of, just what the phrase weather enterprise represented, and the impact of the fair weather report. I wish to heck I could remember what year that was, but this is why I write instead of talk.
I bet somebody on this panel can remember.
2006. It was right after the Santorum proposal actually came out. It was like the next year the academies had the fair weather report come out.
Anyway, I guess my takeaway from my own research was that there's inevitable tension between public and private. And hey, I was a Wall Street Journal reporter for a long time. I'm no stranger to the world of capitalism and the incentives that capitalism can create for innovation. I approached what when I finally turned my eye to that Santorum proposal to the notion that like there's always going to be tension between public and private, and are you always going to get it perfect? No, but drawing a clear line between ensuring the ability of the government to provide public safety service for all of us. Again, I don't know, this sounds ridiculous, but whenever I think about some of this privatization, as a Michigander, suburban Detroit kid, I think of the movie RoboCop, where the city of Detroit, things have gotten so bad, we've turned over policing to this company, and they've got a solution, which is RoboCop. And I think like, well, no, that's, we don't want the private company providing that kind of service. We want public servants. And this is in the book a little bit too, and I worried when I was writing it that it seemed a little too corny, but one reason I kept getting more and more drawn into the story of the world of meteorology and the people who do it was, I'm a lifelong journalist going back to literally high school, stringing for a local paper. And people in journalism, yeah, hey, everybody has different motivations, but I think most of the people I've worked with, I've worked with Pulitzer winners and people who've done amazing investigations. We all like to think that among our other motivations, public service is one of them. I'm a few years shy of having really tuned into All the President's Men when the movie came out, but only a couple. And, famously, the TV show LA Law sparked this like huge spike in, people going to law school. I think for my generation, things like All the President's Men, and then going and reading the actual journalism that was done by Woodward and Bernstein to hold the Nixon administration accountable. We maybe in journalism, we're flattering ourselves, but I think we see a nobility there. Almost to a person, when I would talk with people in the weather world, it may be the motto of the Weather Service, but I just the way people spoke so naturally and unironically of saving lives and protecting property, and for the benefit of the country, that resonated a lot for me, and maybe resonates even more now that I think journalists have become another career zone that get a lot of attacks from people as we're doing a terrible job, or we have strange hidden agendas or whatever, and now sort of seeing some of the the undermining of what's happening in the weather world. So that the Santorum thing struck me as both clumsy and misguided, and even the balance that sort of has resulted. I use a lot of different weather apps, and John, we should ask John about like what the newest weather apps he might want to talk about are. But I also, time and again, I go directly to, the National Weather Service forecast that's being issued from my office, and I want to read the raw output, and I want to see that forecast. And actually, I've been trying to convince my kids that the phone app that they're using is crap. If I could just get the Weather Service forecast fed into an app along with a radar image and a couple of other things, I'd be happier. Again, probably I don't know if I should have said that either, but
we say it all the time, so you're fine. Tom, talk for a minute about present company here, Dr. Kim Clocko McLean and others researchers at NSSL, and the role they played in guiding your understanding of the field, especially as it comes to tornadoes.
Well, so I had and this was before I even had conceived this as a book. I was just, I was getting my feet wet a little. I had been at AMS in Austin in 2018, and I met David Parsons and a couple of other people from OU who were there. And again, like this was maybe a bad problem for meteorology and for society at large, but it was kind of a high class problem for me, which was there were not very many journalists even actually at AMS. And so I think, I was in a little bit of a privileged position because like, oh, I'm a journalist. I've been an editor of Time Magazine and the Wall Street, and so, I felt like I was getting some instant access just by dint of showing up, which is actually a lesson I try to impart on a lot of young journalists, the power of showing up rather than sending an email these days, but I'm fighting a losing battle there. David invited me to visit OU, and eventually we worked out. I visited and spent pretty much the entire week. I went on a storm chase with Sean Waugh. I sat down with probably more than a dozen people on the research side, at at NOAA, at NSSL, on the OU side, people in the whatever the operative acronym for the cooperative agency was at that point. But so, Kim, when I was like, I think I met, I will, I won't do other names, but I remember doing an interview about polar vortex research, and I was like, okay, this is clearly important, and this is clearly something that I will not understand without at least a few more years of college. When I talked with Kim, not that that material is any less education required, but I think what I responded to pretty quickly was not just the amazing power of trying to study people and their responses more. And, we talked about some of the field work that had been done with Vortex Southeast. But I don't know which engaged me more, just how interesting the work was, or how relatively recent this strain of work was. And again, and I had started off by going back and looking at a couple of other books that had been done about weather forecasting, and a couple of the most prominent ones tended to take, for a general audience, tended to take more of a history approach of, this was how forecasting has evolved. And I'm just, again, like I'm a news guy who grew up in the 80s and started his career in the early 90s. I'm always like, okay, so what's the news here? And I was like, wow, we've really only started digging much deeper into this people problem in an integrated way with the rest of weather research within the last 10, 15. I mean, I could stretch it to 20, and Kim should correct me on whatever year she, I get mixed up between what year it was when I was writing parts of this in the book and what year it actually is now. But when she talked me through, I think especially some of that field work, and I really started to gravitate to this as a big theme of the book, which is, first of all, dear reader, forecasting is much better than you already realize, because you probably, have commented within the last 30 days to someone in your family or office that, oh, the forecast was wrong. So let me try to explain to you why actually the forecast is better than you appreciate. And let me use the words deterministic and probabilistic, two words that my book editor did not really enjoy reading very much or very often. Let me not only explain to you how much better forecasting is and how it keeps getting better, but let me explain to you that, we have important work to do in turning our good forecasts into the outcomes that ultimately we care about. And, there are people like Kim and her colleagues and at other, centers around the US, and, in some other places around the world where, people are working hard on this problem, and it's you don't flip a switch and you don't change forecast communications. You don't change warning communications on a whim, because you're just going to confuse people more. And again, maybe going back to some of the budget stuff, if you'll just forgive me for one more moment. Move fast and break things, I think, maybe works okay in the world of computer code, and whether the next version of Microsoft Word is going to have, extra font selection menu number 3. It doesn't work in public safety and in sort of, the the critical world of forecasting, the critical world of emergency management. You don't, and it doesn't work in, it doesn't work in cancer research, pharmaceutical development either. You can't move fast and break things. You have to do your work and do it carefully and be able to show your work, and then ultimately be able to say with confidence, this change that we're doing is it's worthwhile, and it's actually going to be better, and that is supported by data. So sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a rant about move fast and break things. It strikes me that move fast and break things is not really a great thing to hear from the entire industry developing self-driving cars, as well. I'd like the car to move a little slower and not break anything, especially if I'm in it. But
oh my gosh, you have me laughing so hard over here. It is an interesting time, and I want to come back to something that you said that I thought was such a lovely sentiment, and pull it through and come back to this question about the budget just with a slightly different framing. So you mentioned how refreshing it was, honestly, to come and talk to everybody in our field. And that's one of the reasons why I think we all love working in this field, because our job is to look into the future. And unlike some professions where the job is to exploit that, okay, you've got an insight, so exploit it for profit or gain, personal gain. Ours is just completely use it to give people hope in a good future. And our whole field is just filled with people who are dedicated to sowing hope into the future and helping people. And it is so refreshing. There was another author who made weather a little bit of a focus. He was looking at the government as a whole in a book that he wrote, Michael Lewis, when he wrote Fifth Risk. And he looked at weather a little bit, but he was, in the last couple of months, he was on, I think, the Tonight Show, and he was talking about federal employees, sort of what you were just talking about, as a whole. And we were part of this, but there are others I know. And he was commenting that he just thought that he'd found people who figured out how to live, because they found a purpose-driven life. And that's the secret that most people don't know about federal employees, is just how much it's about that. It is about that service. There's this like myth of the public employee as someone who's just on the dole, it doesn't care. But what people find sometimes when they come in is they find this. And I've thought about this year, there's something really interesting and unique about you having worked in the development of the internet and like monitoring that, following that over time. I keep having this feeling that the internet, living in that virtual world, is taking some of that hope from us. It's putting us up against sort of the worst of humanity in like really amplified ways. And I think that's hurting us. And there's something about weather that is able to cut through that. It brings us all back together. Weather is the great unifier in that it can affect anybody. Look at what happened in Texas and the response that's gone on. It's been extremely bipartisan. It's been this stark reminder of anyone, anywhere, truly. And it's something that cuts into the noise that the internet produces. The real world is always there. I'm wondering, with what you've seen of our field, and now seeing it just as it's been under attack, as all of this infrastructure has been under attack. What do you see as the future here, as you've seen the internet evolve and what it's doing to society? But there's pieces of us out there that are still trying. We're trying to bring people to, there is this physical reality, and we're trying to bring you to it and trying to bring people through it. How do we marry these things? It is so tough. It is so tough to cut through the noise, but we have to. We absolutely have to, if people like us are not only going to survive, but if everyone is. You know what I mean?
I mean, I suspect we all are believers in, the arc of history, bends toward the, the right direction. But even, it just struck me right now hearing you bring up that, yeah, I was writing about the internet back in those early days. That was a time in the technology world of hope, of optimism. I don't know if, again, I don't know how geeky you guys were on the information technology side, but there was this one of the early big message board systems, the Whole Earth Electronic Link, the WELL, that Stuart Brand, the creator of the Whole Earth catalog, the creator of the Whole Earth catalog. I mean, no billionaire venture capitalist, people thought, oh my gosh, what amazing potential we have here to be able to communicate with each other, to communicate. The first time I used the internet, I went into this basement computer room at my college, and I had, I think, written through the US mail to one of my high school friends who was at the University of Michigan, and we had worked out like, okay, what's your internet email? What's my internet email? Oh my gosh, I can send you a message. I can even like do a chat with you in real time. I mean, there was so much potential for this, and we saw much of that realized, and then at some point, people start showing up to ruin the party. I guess at least on the technology side. I think that, I hope that there are some signs of hope from that technology evolution, which is, and again, I don't even, this is not a political view for me. The quality of conversation on Twitter, now X, I think, I know a lot of people in journalism feel it has degraded, because if you look through replies, half of the replies are obvious, like partisan one way or partisan the other way, from people whose usernames are like Tom 8675389. Wait, did I just do the Jenny number subconsciously?
That's outstanding.
Sorry. Wow, boy, you can't take the boy out of the 80s.
Show title. There's your show title right
No,
there.
that is the show title. That's it. We found it. Yeah.
But but some of those people, when they saw this sort of the trolling and the bots, and how quickly we have forgotten that there has been some evidence that there are actual like foreign influence campaigns in our social media networks, with bots that are kind of programmed to jump in and try to inflame, rather than calm discussions. But some people have said, okay, well, can we do it better? And they've created Blue Sky, which doesn't have the scale of Twitter, but I spend more time on and find the conversations there to be more reasonable. I know some people would criticize it as, being, partisan in another direction, but I think it's evening out a little bit over time. And so, I do think I have to hope that there's a pendulum at work. Obviously, especially, not just even within the world of meteorology, but within the world of science and expertise, the pendulum has swung to a point right now where populism versus somehow elite has become conflated with expertise. And I'd like to introduce and discuss the salary ranges of most of the people working in worlds of expertise other than financial services, and get them to try to square that with elitism for me. But, if the pendulum has swung, Kim, to that point, I have to hope that there's some thermostatic balance that comes out of it, and that it falls back. But I'm not sure it does that without all of us pulling hard. And and I feel this maybe more than almost anybody from my profession, which is communicating with people in a way that helps them to understand the benefits of science and technology and meteorology and cancer research and so many other areas of science. And I mean, obviously we're talking a lot of within the context of the Weather Service, and and I suspect that in the world of private enterprise right now there are a lot of people who are just as concerned about what will happen with NOAA and the Weather Service, because in some ways their own businesses rely on it, but it may be an atmosphere where they feel intimidated to speak up for science. And so I think there's this broad challenge over the next couple of years for all of us to figure out not just how to speak up for science, but how to speak up effectively. And when I was a kid, I was very, again, this isn't weather, but I was very obsessed with the space program and space travel. And I had gone to the government printing office bookstore, and I had this series of books that NASA desperately trying to boost its budget, in the post Apollo years, and getting into shuttle. Every year there'd be this book like Spinoff 78, Spinoff 79. Here's a report for you, the public, on all of the sort of great developments that you can use that have come out of research that's been done for the space program. And I don't know, we all got to hire a good publicist or figure out, and hopefully science journalists are part of that. But I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but I am I guess if I zoom the camera out from a perspective of the next year or two to maybe the next 5 or 10, I have to believe that there is some sort of shift in the pendulum. And I don't know how many of you had a chance to tune in for that AMS Zoom Friday with past presidents of AMS. And one of the themes that came up a little bit was kind of accepting the current situation, but accepting it in the sense of, we're not going to be able to hit an undo button on what's happening, but we also can aspire to rebuild, improve, reorganize, expand. And, I'd like to see better branding than I can come up with, but, essentially Project 2026 or Project 2028 or something like that, where we are already developing the plans for how to support science and how to um, make the next moves in the right direction after we get through this period, which again, my perspective as a journalist is it's not just cutting, but it's indiscriminate cutting. It's I think I think the reporting backs this up. It's quota based. It's I want to be able to say we cut 10,000 jobs in Department X. I want to be able to say we cut 20,000 jobs in Department Y. What's the quickest way to do it? Is the quickest way to do it really going to, like prioritize functions and all of that? Not that we could remotely afford to lose that many people to begin with, but again, I just, put me in one of those congressional hearings and I want to ask some people a few basic factual questions like, can you tell me what a warning coordination meteorologist does? Can you tell me what a, skew-T diagram is and why we count on that to, as part of a lot of other things to protect us from, severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. And, my own experience of a journalist would be that you'd get a lot of hamana if you pressed past a sort of top layer of that knowledge.
Tom, the subject of fire is in the news way too much. I was heartbroken yesterday to see the Grand Canyon Lodge on the North Rim burn yesterday. We stayed there a few years ago, and I know it can be rebuilt, but that just seems like an irretrievable loss. But you spent a lot of time talking about fire in the book. What were some of the really cool things you learned about that?
So again, I try to get out as much as possible and see people in real life and kind of watch over their shoulders. And so, and again, I think this is another connection I made at another AMS, but the head meteorologist for San Diego Gas and Electric was, talking to me about their in-house meteorology work and, some of the things they do to monitor wildfire weather and also some of the actions that they're able to take, um, as the probability of that weather firms up and gets closer. But I wound up just, to try to report it out in person. I went for a week to San Diego and, and I had a great opportunity. They let me into SDG&E to see their operations center and how forecasting is, a key part of their operations center and, their network of weather stations, throughout their coverage area, which is, obviously, we all benefit from the mesonets, operated in different states, but they're running this much more granular, just focused on their coverage area system of weather stations. But on the same trip, I went and I visited the San Diego WFO and got to meet and talk with people there. And then I went to Cal Fire and I sat with some people at Cal Fire and they showed me some of the software they use, that presents weather information to them, in a form that they can use to both watch out for conditions, but also direct operations when there's a fire, and even gets translated down to a very simple smartphone interface for people in the field, to basically again, there's a human factors element of this. The fire commander doesn't want to hear a 20-minute, weather briefing. They want to know, go east now or that sort of thing. And I even wound up speaking, meeting with some of the officials who provide city services, like being able to help people get medication when they've had to evacuate their house, or help people find shelter if they've had to evacuate, or help people with medical equipment if there's been a power shut off. And the great takeaway for me, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear if you all have a different take on it, but I came away, I went there because I was curious about the electric company doing weather forecasting, and I came away with this better appreciation, similar to what I saw observing John, in his office, that mostly out of the sight of public view, there is a constant communication going on between stakeholders in public safety and weather. And it was almost comical, because every stop I went on my trip, everybody else already knew where I had been, and they knew where I was going, because those people are all talking to each other all the time. And that once I learned it intellectually, it made sense, but I was a little surprised to learn it, and I just I felt like there was such a big takeaway from it about the type of cooperation that we should hope is taking place between our local officials and fire and police and healthcare and all the other things that affect safety, and that it is factoring in what our weather experts have to say as well. So it was a trip that really influenced me a lot. And I get back to my computer and I do more research and I do other interviews, but there's no substitute. That you just learn things as a reporter when you go out and get to see people and places in person that you can't get otherwise. And it's kind of one of the great pleasures of reporting out a book like this, is to get to go meet people and get I don't know, I find it it's fun. I like getting to see what people do. I sat in this operations center at SDG&E, and they kept calling up pictures from different the video feed from different weather stations through the valley. And I don't think I really appreciated that terrain, even having driven around quite a bit just to orient myself, until I saw the different cameras, and then saw the model that they are running on a supercomputer at the University of San Diego to really give them some hyper local through the valleys wind forecasts. So I don't know, that's probably more than San Diego you wanted to know about. Also, it's very nice in San Diego, I have to say, as a as a New Yorker who had not spent much time there, except of course for the the threat of fire.
I was going to say that probably was not a hard assignment to accept, going to San Diego for a week for sure. You spent some time at least investigating. I don't know if you came to Alabama, but you talked about Beauregard in Lee County, Alabama, a devastating tornado that happened here a few years ago. Talk about that research for a minute, because that tornado was very devastating for people in our state here.
Well, I mean, first, I remember I was already starting, I was probably just, working on my book proposal at the time, but I had already spoken to Kim about Vortex Southeast, and I had a chance to meet a few others at NSSL, and I was watching this unfold in the news with such a heavy heart, because it was just it's obviously any time we lose lives in one of these events, it's tragic. But I had again, thanks to my research, I had this sort of new perspective about and I don't know, it has come into play again and again. I don't, I don't actually see that one as an example of where there was some sort of quick movement to try to blame the forecasts. But when I was writing it up in the book, I went back and I looked at the SPC outlooks from the days beforehand, and it was a case where you could see, as we've been talking about, you know as the event got closer, the risk levels going up and up, and the potential for a really devastating event rising, and well, I believe well warned ultimately. But I also now had been educated in a sense from some of those vortex southeast findings, and more broadly, the problem of lack of shelter in some of those areas, especially where people are living in mobile homes and manufactured housing. And I tried to frame that in the book, first of all, just obviously as one of these devastating tragedies that I know you all find so hard to deal with as part of your work, but also as a tragedy that underscored our potential, if we keep working at it, to try to get the forecast to translate into the better outcomes. And I think in that Alabama case, there were I don't remember the exact number offhand, but definitely an element of deaths from people who weren't in shelter, because they were in mobile homes. And I guess if you don't mind, I'll toss in there that a big takeaway for me personally, as well as hopefully for readers, I grew up in Michigan, and tornadoes, that was the thing in elementary school they trained us as little kids. You hear the sirens go off, you get to the basement. If you're at school, they'd marshal us all into the gym in the center of the school, the interior room. I naively, a naive Michigander, when I came to the East Coast when I was in college, uh, uh, I was going to visit my girlfriend, who is now my wife and still my wife, at her college in Boston. And I had planned this weekend trip, and I was heading off, and a friend of mine, at college said, "Wait, you're taking the train up to Boston? There's a hurricane coming, right?" And I was kind of like, "Hurricane? What? It's not like there's a tornado coming." And the short version is it was Gloria. There were massive power outages in the Northeast. I slept in the New Haven train station with emergency lighting, along with about 200 other people on the floor overnight. And it took me 23 hours to get from New Jersey to Boston. This kept coming up as a memory for me as I researched all of these different examples in the book, which is, in some ways, the weather people need to worry about isn't the weather they're the most familiar with, it's the weather they're least familiar with. I tried to focus on the 2021 heat wave in the Pacific Northwest in that regard. But, it has also struck me in the context of flooding, because I really now, believe that until someone has either been exposed to really good communication about it or has experienced it themselves, conceptually, it's so hard for anyone's brain to wrap their heads around how quickly water could move, could engulf. And so actually my daughter, who is 22, was headed out with some friends tonight, and there is a flash flood warning in the city, and she was only going down to 71st Street, so I wasn't super worried. We're on higher ground here in upper Manhattan. But I now I spec out the subway pretty carefully when it's raining this hard before you'll get me to go down those steps. And I just, again, another hope for me in people reading the book is to recognize the value of being mentally prepared for any sort of weather. And we could probably, and you guys would have a much more sophisticated approach to it than I would, but a conversation about watches and warnings. And I think for a lot of the general public, those are discrete announcements or discrete forecasts. There's now a watch, it's in effect or whatever. There's now a warning. Oh, it's now a weather emergency. And what I have been trying to tell as many friends and family as well as hopefully readers is you need to don't think of those as discrete. Think of it as a spectrum. Think of the watch as your cue to start just, do a thought experiment. Hey, I see there's a watch tomorrow for, severe thunderstorms. I see there's a watch tomorrow for flood. Okay, well, maybe that's not going to happen, but where am I going to be tomorrow? Well, I'm just going to be at the office. So, okay, maybe that's okay. No, I'm going to be on a sales call, or I am going to be, driving to pick up, a family member. Okay, well, if I was located here and it got worse, what would I do? And I try to bring, which I like to think I've learned from talking with you all and so many experts, just starting to think of that problem as a spectrum rather than a an orange red double red or whatever type of thing. I want to monitor the evolution of the weather, and I want to evolve my preparation and eventually response if necessary. I don't know how I don't know if you guys would explain it that way to family, friends, whatever, but that's how I've started to think about it.
And last thing I'll ask Tom, and I'll make sure none of the other panelists have anything to say. And I want to make sure John Vangoff gets to say anything he wants to say before James Spann asks all the hard questions, as he always does at the end. But you mentioned a revolution in weather forecasting. Talk about what you mean by that.
So there's a couple. It's very intimidating talking with you guys because in some ways part of my job is to not only simplify things but oversimplify things for a general audience readership that I hope will pick up the book at Barnes and Noble if they see it on the table. But
that's our job too. So we covet your perspective.
Well, it just it struck trying to explain to people the arc of progress. It struck me that as I read a little bit of the history of when the telegraph first began to be used to hey Boston, Chicago here, storming today. You guys might want to get ready, in a couple of days. Then you had this quantum leap in the 50s and 60s as the world had access to radar. The world had access to suddenly, satellites, and the world had access to digital computing, and the equations to try to predict the weather. It suddenly became feasible to solve those on a routine basis because we didn't have to do them by hand. We had computers to do for it, and when I looked at the progress, from there and just how year after year, and I looked at charts that show improvement of, hurricane track, forecasts and, temperature forecasts and, just impressed by the progress. But then also at this moment in time, and when I say moment, I guess, it's been a few years because it took me a long time to write this book because I am a famously slow writer. I was like, wow, look at what's happening right now. We've got AI popping into the mix. We have, and although I feel terrible saying this, as we've just seen this whole flap over, satellite data, being cut off. Oh wait, well it's not being cut off right away. We have the potential for new types of data sources from new types of satellites from some of the people I spoke to, and these are more sort of specialty applications for one that I looked at was companies that want to operate drone delivery systems and things like that commercially in the US, or Waymo, the self-driving car people. But we have the opportunity to take information from things like webcams and sensors that are integrated with cars, which are roaming around. And there was even this ESA experiment with an Android app to just collect data from the barometric pressure sensor in the phone. And I think, to be realistic, like, a problem with a lot of these is like, okay, well, you could get this data, but it's so much data, and there's a lot of error correction you need. How valuable is it really? But AI, new types of data that we may be able to collect, and then on top of that, again, I was just so struck by how relatively recent all of the social factors work was, especially as it related to being integrated with forecast communication improvements and all of that. And that's where I really felt like, wow, this is, like, I feel like we're at a point where the curve can shoot up again, not just with the accuracy of forecasts, but also the effectiveness of forecasts. And we could do a whole AI bit, but I was pretty influenced by the time I spent with the ECMWF people, and also a few good pubs near the ECMWF, just to again try to make my reporting trips pay off in multiple dimensions. But I felt like some of the discussion around I I get frustrated when I see sort of outlandish claims for AI in the general media, like, oh, company X announced their model beat everyone for the last year. Like, well, okay, whatever. When I talked with people there about, hey, we could take this much supercomputer bandwidth and we could, instead of doing 100 more traditional ensemble members, we could do 5,000 AI ensemble members. And, there's probably some really amazing way to integrate our traditional physics-based modeling with the efficiency and speed of, the machine learning systems. Like, that feels really exciting. And, I have to balance my excitement with my skepticism, because again, a big lesson I learned covering the internet back in those 90s days was companies will make claims that, literally part of the job as a technology reporter at the Wall Street Journal was to hear out whatever company was announcing their new development and basically like apply a 50% bullshit factor at least to what they were what they were talking about. A big example I remember was, oh my God, the ads will be targeted at you exactly. But this is like 1995. It took basically another 15 plus years for that type of targeting to actually come about and be of any use to advertisers. So it's like I'm excited about a lot of the things that are taking place. But at the same time, I'm really concerned that, like, oh, well, why do we have to pay to these scientists to keep improving these models when this company says their AI thing can, do it with like two guys and, one rack of processors, and and also they have a ping pong table, and they get free snacks or something. So I don't know. Again, maybe cautiously optimistic is more the thing, but I do think it is a potential revolution with all of the things that are happening right now. If we are all, and I don't mean you, I mean societally, we are all smart enough to to figure out how to use it. And again, when I think about OAR and the research element of this, and then separately from that discussion, the broader cuts to science funding, research grants. I know so many people across so many disciplines who are, being impacted by this. And it's like, you know what? I don't want the molecular biologists having their grants cut. I want them to, like, we've seen some amazing things come out of that in the last 20 years. This is what has made American science the envy of the world. We can have it. It's a revolution if you want it. I feel is like, the best way I can put it.
One thing before I toss it to John Pangoff, and then James Spann asks the hard questions. Then we've got these conspiracy theorists, and James A just posted. Now they've got evangelists. James A, describe that flyer that your boss got today, real quick, and then Tom, just comment real briefly on how do we fight these headwinds.
Yeah, we got an Earth is flat flyer. Even has all the mistakes, all the what did it call it? The NASA fails about, I won't dignify it much further.
I wish I had a good answer for how we combat the misinformation. The incentives have become so powerful in multiple dimensions, for that misinformation. And, I think we're still learning the ramifications of having what is essentially an attention economy. And, as any parent knows, when your child really wants attention, their little child, they're going to throw a tantrum. And we're now exposed to these tantrums every day on social media. I think trying to communicate as much as possible about impact rather than abstract sides of things are helpful. I think also pointing people to evidence from sources that may confound their predisposition. And again, it's like when I talk to people about climate and skepticism there, my short version has been, I was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. I covered public companies. I sifted through SEC filings. You know what? Grab yourself a stack of SEC filings for insurance, reinsurance, housing. We can come up with a list of 10 industries. Go through there and read the risk factors that these companies are talking about. Believe me, as a former Wall Street Journal reporter, these are not woke companies trying to sneak some hidden green new steel agenda into their corporate plans. Corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to try to maximize their profit. When they're telling you that their future profit is going to be impacted by, all of these climate factors, like don't, if you don't want to believe the scientist, but believe the person who is having to bet money in one direction or another on it. And I don't know. I try to follow people like Kate Starbird and other people, who are wrestling with this problem. Journalism suffers at least as much from this problem, and the tactics so far of overcorrecting by I think sort of catering to what the audience may want. I don't see it paying off. I just see it causing people with preconceptions to feel more validated about their erroneous preconceptions. So I don't know. I hope we will all, I know you guys work so hard as communicators. I, you know, I hope some people will read my book and hopefully come away from it thinking, okay, wow, this is more important than I appreciated. And, it, when you learn something behind the scenes, maybe that gives you a little bit different perspective. But I don't know, like the biggest story this week was freaking Love Island. So I don't know what to tell you. My kids tried to explain Love Island to me, and I don't know. Give me Magnum PI or anything. Hill Street Blues, or I'm really dating myself here. I actually, more seriously, I have watched my now young adult kids watch some of my favorite TV shows from back then, and they can't watch them because they're too slow. They just, the pace of what is expected from communication now is, if you're not honing the skills of how to impart a message in 90 seconds of a TikTok, and thank heavens, people from TV and radio are already have skill at this, but it's just the pressure. How did we get to a world where 140 characters was like a meaningful amount of information to impart? Says the guy who wrote 90,000 words.
John Bangoff, you close us out here before James asks a couple of questions.
Yeah, sounds good. Just as a sort of a summative thought, I guess, is I just finished reading the book cover to cover. I guess finished the end of it on my flight stay out to Kansas City. And I just say for anybody that's connected to the Weather Enterprise, it's a really energizing and fascinating look at all the really cool stuff that's going on. It's sort of cross sectors. There's conversations about what's happening on the front lines in the emergency management realm, within fire, weather, within the private sector, within ECMWF, a lot of modeling, a lot of AI type conversations. And I think for me, in the midst of all the tumult that's going on, there's been a lot of negativity swirling. I think Tom's book does a really great job of defining what we do, what's important, and what the future might bring. So I'd encourage everybody to check it out. I'm not getting any payback from this whatsoever. I have nothing to gain other than truly just being excited about what Tom's done. It definitely helped spur me on. So I encourage you guys to check it out in whatever location you get your books. And so, Tom, thanks for bringing me along for the journey. It's been a blast, and it's been fun hearing from you tonight as well.
Yeah, John, thank you so much, because getting to really understand your work was one of the pivotal experiences that shaped my perspective on the whole thing. And again, Kim, I can't thank you enough as well. And I mean that, I wish I could name every single person, but it's a list of hundreds. So many people throughout the enterprise, throughout the weather service, throughout universities, throughout media, throughout private companies, were just all so patient in explaining, again, to this liberal arts major who had to take physics for poets, instead of a real hard science. Everyone was so patient explaining this to me, and I wish I could say that I pay John off, but as a government employee, he was scrupulous in not even letting me buy him lunch. Which again, I relate to a lot of people. A lot of people, I believe, would be surprised to know this, but when I worked at the Wall Street Journal, every year, every single one of us had to sign this document that was the code of conduct. And it was, I want to say it was an 8-page document where you had to answer like 10 questions on each page to verify that in the past year you had not done any of the following, which was basically do anything that where you could have gained from your work for the Wall Street Journal. And I'm so aware these days of so many people who are skeptical of journalists and journalism. And I want to tell them, I was like, you know, I couldn't even buy a stock. Like, we were only allowed to invest our retirement in mutual funds, lest we glean some little tidbit that might make it look like we had traded on something that was in the paper. The farthest they would go was, if you had lunch with a source, you could pick up the tab as long as they picked up the tab the next time, so that they canceled each other out or something like that. And again, I just have so much respect for you all and the integrity that I learned that you bring to your work. And it's something that in the journalism world, I think, we all, at least my generation, we certainly aspired to. And so, all of that just always resonated with me, almost every person that I met.
All right. So again, fascinating discussion. Tom and John, thank you. But we're running long here, so we've got to take a break. And I've got about 27 questions here. I'll answer that on the next show here. So let's take a quick break and hear from Tony Rice and the Astronomy Report. We'll hear from Jim this week in 20 history. We're going to go straight back and come back into picks of the week. So everybody have a pick of the week ready. We will do the email segment next week, but let's pause as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
On this day in space weather history 10 years ago, the Sun released one of the most powerful solar storms ever recorded, known as the Bastille Day event. Even the Voyager spacecraft felt it more than 9 billion miles away. That shockwave reached Voyager 2 180 days later, and Voyager 1 245 days later. Here on Earth, we felt the effects within minutes, in the form of an extreme dose of ultraviolet and X-ray radiation. The next evening, New Yorkers described the aurora they saw in the sky as catching fire. Red skies were visible overhead into the Carolinas, and aurora was sighted as far south as Mexico. This was notable not just because of the pretty lights in the sky, but it was the first extreme solar event observed by spacecraft capable of measuring it. The Solar and Heliophysics Observatory's LASCO instrument was normally rock solid, but the momentarily snowy image from all that energy made it look a bit like a 70s era television after station sign-off. This was an X 5.7 class flare, and was measured to have released 10 to the 33rd ergs of magnetic energy. SpaceWeather.com describes this as the equivalent of 1,000 billion World War II era atomic bombs. Elsewhere in the sky, WeatherBrains listeners in California and western Nevada looked to the west Tuesday morning for the return of the Axiom 4 SpaceX Dragon capsule from the International Space Station. Splashdown is scheduled for 2:31 a.m. Pacific. The reentry path that runs along the California coast from the north to the south. It will be passing the San Francisco Bay Area beginning around 2:23 a.m. I would start looking about 10 minutes before that. And everybody can look for Saturn and the Moon to cozy up in the pre-dawn sky this week. They'll be at their closest about 4 degrees apart on Wednesday morning. Between them will be Neptune, another 1.8 billion miles away, and therefore not really visible without a sizable telescope. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
The devastation is unreal. They're trying to clear streets now. It's amazing the way the homes are scattered about. Some we can't even find. That was captain of the Oakfield First Responders Crisis Response Team, Lawrence Endermuhl, in a newspaper article the day after a massive F5 tornado struck the small village of Oakfield, Wisconsin on July 18th, 1996. This significant tornado started its journey at 7:05 p.m. Central Daylight Time, approximately 4 miles to the west and northwest of Oakfield. It moved east-southeast toward the village. Per the National Weather Service, quote, witnesses reported that the tornado paused for a minute or so on the southeast edge of Oakfield. The National Weather Service also states that as the tornado began to move in, it turned more to the east and produced mainly F4 damage. Numerous homes and businesses were damaged in town. The Friday Canning Company was leveled. Millions of empty cans were carried a distance over 50 miles. 2 churches and numerous vehicles were destroyed. Between 1 to 4 miles east of Oakfield, there was evidence of F5 damage. In this area, 4 homes were demolished, swept clean from their foundations. In the original local storm report about the tornado damage, the National Weather Service states that steel rebar supports from one of the home's foundations were bent 60 to 90 degrees. Debris from this tornado was found near the Lake Michigan shoreline, and there were canceled checks discovered 125 miles away near the town of Muskegon. No one was killed, and there were 12 injuries. Read more about this event at tornadotalk.com.
All right, so to save time, we will hold the email until next week, and we are going to go right into Picks of the Week. This is where everybody on the show has some type of cool weather site, website, data source, hardware, software, anything that's remotely weather related. So let's go to James Adelot because he's about to do the 9 o'clock news on Fox 23 in Tulsa. So James, what you got for us?
Mine is the Facebook pages for Grand Canyon National Park and Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado. 2 lightning-caused fires, and Bill brought this up a little earlier, have caused lots of trouble, including Black Canyon National Park. I think was closed this morning, the entire park. Lots of evacuations from both, and at last check, both fires were 0% containment. So rolling into that season.
Goodness. All right. So all these picks will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. Jen, what is your pick of the week?
So mine is the Facebook page of the PA Storm Trackers. They held an event on Saturday that I got a chance to go to, and it was a Meet the Chasers event. I finally got to shake the hand of Tim Marshall. He was the main speaker there. Great event. They had about 20 chasers that were there, and folks had come in from the community and see their chase vehicles. And so they're probably like, "What are you doing here, lady?" And I'm like, "I chase tornado history." So that's how I led into my spiel. And it was a lot of fun. It was hot, very hot day, but it was a lot of fun. I hope they continue this event. It was a lot of fun.
Good deal. Sounds great. Okay, John Gordon. John Gordon, what's your pick of the week?
Thanks, James. So, okay. Do you know your propagation on a complex of storms? You have a pilot who tells you there's some storms between Memphis and Chicago. And the pilot just assumes it's moving from the west to the east at 30. He'll be gone. But people don't understand the propagation vectors, downwind and upwind. It's a combination of steering flow and low-level storm relative flow. So there's this great website, which I will be on the site from luther.edu, and Corfiti came up with this. And when you see the Texas thing, you see a backward propagation vector, which means the storms keep forming and forming backward. And that's the big cause of these big flash floods. And my anti-pick of the week, I feel so bad that people are not adhering to turn around, don't drown. Tom Weber, we got to do something. If people have lost their minds. We have people driving through water up to their windows in Spain, in Mongolia, in Davenport, Iowa, in Boston, in Raleigh, in New Mexico, in Texas. For God's sakes, people, turn around, don't drown. It's gone nuts. It's like people have lost their minds. Don't drive through water of unknown depth, people.
Outstanding. This sermon segment brought to you by johngordon.com. No, look, I see it too. I see it all the time, John. I think it's an increasing problem. What's happened to people? I don't understand it. It's not that hard. So, goodness. All right. So, Kim, what's your pick of the week? Go.
Just a quick pick for me. My pick is the recording of the the hearing for Neil Jacobs to be confirmed.
Our friend, our dear close friend, Neil Jacobs. I thought he performed just wonderfully, if you've not seen that. So, again, we'll put it up on weatherbrains.com. My pick, it's a hard one. I selected an obituary, and I don't think I've ever done that before. Sarah Marsh was an 8-year-old child getting ready to go into third grade at Cherokee Bend Elementary School in Mountain Brook. And she was swept away, and she lost her life in the Texas floods. And her mom is a family physician here in Birmingham. Her dad is a professor at Samford University. And if you can't look at that child's face and just struggle and feel that pain, you're not human. And to me, it's motivating for me to be better at what I do when it comes to warning people about stuff like this. But again, that'll be my pick of the week. All right, John, we're going to go to you. And I must say, your hair is even more impressive on this show than the first time. That is some hair right there. That's outstanding.
James, I appreciate it. I told everybody after a day of travel, I needed to make sure that it was looking okay to live up to the reputation. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I'm gonna,
I mean, the first show was unbelievably good, but this is even better.
I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to take off my Weather Service hat and put on my friend hat. Two quick things that I want to highlight. First off, Tom alluded to it. One of my good buddies, Dylan Steinkruger, developed a really neat app for iOS called Weatherfront. Some really innovative user interface. Definitely recommend everybody checks that one out. The second thing is another guy that got mentioned earlier in the show, John Neese, professor at Penn State. His new book, along the same lines of the theme tonight, The Weather Gods Curse the Gettysburg Campaign, is available everywhere. He worked with a Gettysburg historian to discuss the weather leading up to, during, and after the Gettysburg battle, using some newly created NOAA reanalysis data. A really compelling look at sort of the way weather impacted that battle. It has a significant impact on weather history. So John Neese, great guy, friend of the program, as well as been on the Weather Channel. Really, really well-known guy, but definitely encourage you guys, if you're interested in reading a book. Again, it's called The Weather Gods Curse the Gettysburg Campaign.
Excellent. Again, these picks will be on weatherbrains.com. So, Tom, give us something good. And first off, I got to say, I need a cool mic with a green light that lights up when I'm speaking, like Tom's. That's outstanding. So, Tom, what you got for us?
This, I feel, is just shockingly reductive after we've talked about propagation vectors and all of your other picks. But my pick this week, hopefully in the spirit of everything we've talked about, is the idea of giving NOAA weather radios as gifts. I am going to start giving them as gifts to people. I've mentioned them to friends and family, but I have decided I am just going to start trying to evangelize their use by, when I need a gift for somebody. I'm sure I'll get like one thrown at me at some point. I probably not a great anniversary gift, I'm thinking, but I would like to see everybody have access to this, and I hope there's some other work that can be done to get those out there. And I will just say, as a side note there, more broadly, and it's again something I worry about a lot with the younger generation, which is recognizing not only the importance of official sources like NOAA Weather Radio, but also trusted communicators like you, Jim, and and everybody who does the work of communicating to the public. The kids are just not watching linear TV. They are not listening to radio. They are doing everything on demand, which I just increases the problem for emergency communications, which I think is a great reason to get your college student kid or kid in their first apartment or whatever a NOAA weather radio.
That is outstanding, and I think that is a great anniversary gift. Come on, I mean, come on, that's the ultimate right there. But Tom, for people that want to get Cloud Warriors, the book, what's the best way?
It's at Barnes and Noble. It's at Amazon. It's at any major bookstore. And if if you want a shortcut, go to www.cloudwarriorsbook.com, and there's links there to buy it from your favorite bookstore. Along with some, like I said, I have some behind the scenes photos that I took during my reporting. And I think you see the back of John's head in one of those. Honestly, John, since I didn't have a photo release from you, I didn't want to put you on the website beyond that. But and obviously, as an author, I'm happy for people to buy the book. But I also, I hope people will get a positive message out of it that speaks to the work that you all do and that I just have gained so much respect for. And so a pleasure to be on, really, kind of an honor for me to be on with you guys here tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. It was a great show. We really appreciate your time. And for those that are new here, we are on the air every week. This is year number 19. We'll hit 20 next January. But we're typically on the air every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. And you can watch it live at youtube.com/weatherbrains. But we know that most of you listen to the show, the podcast version. If you watch, listen, thank you. And I promise we're going to spend some time with email next week. But if you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so
Great
much for
show.
being on.